Well, the largest minority group in the U.S. is people with disabilities. And the individuals within this group are incredibly diverse themselves, comprising of different races, cultures, religions, and socioeconomic classes. Considering this, why don't we hear more about disability issues in the political sphere, aside from so-called campaign promises during election years? And how would more disability representation in politics affect the issues that matter most to Americans with disabilities? Joining me at the desk to answer these questions and more is Timothy Kneeland, professor and chairperson of political science and history at Nazareth College. And Tim is also director of the Center for Public History at Naz. And also joining us today is Justin Young, Pool Trust advocate for the Center for Disability Rights. And it is great to have both of you back on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Great.
So we'll jump right in, and I want to start by getting your opinion on something, and I will give this to you first, Justin. Do you think our political sphere thoroughly acknowledges the needs for individuals with disabilities? I mean, are disability issues prioritized and acted upon in our political system?
I would say no.
Why?
Because unfortunately, there's a disconnect somewhere. There's good intentions of the political people who have these in their platforms. Disability issues were both in the Democratic and Republican platforms for the presidential nominees in 2016. But however, they have not committed to standing with the disability community and ensuring that our issues are being pushed forward as quickly and as smoothly as possible. And the Congress, specifically, over the past year, basically, has not done good things for not only just America, but for the disability community specifically of America.
What do you think? Justin said good intentions, but nothing has come through. How would you respond?
And I think, again, you're talking about nearly 1 in 5 Americans have a form of disability. And in some ways, that actually works against the ability of these groups to come together to form a specific pressure group that will get the action they need from elected officials. Because, as you said, they're so diverse. They're both diverse politically as well. There are Republicans and Democrats on both sides, and the needs of each population within the broader disability community are different. And so in some cases, you've actually got people, shall we say, competing for resources as opposed to combining their efforts in order to get key legislation passed. And that helps the politicians express sympathy, but then also hold back on action. And I think that really is something that needs to be addressed from a savvy political point of view, but also for politicians to be more engaged with people in the disability community.
Mm-hmm. So before we move on, let's talk about what would you both say are some of the top issues for individuals with disabilities right now, and issues specifically that our political system can directly influence or impact?
I'd say the persistent unemployment among people with disabilities, and that needs addressed in terms of education, vocational opportunities. The story that preceded us about the ride-sharing efforts, clearly the government can put pressure on Uber and Lyft to comply with ADA requirements in order to make sure that people can facilitate trips back and forth to their jobs. So training, education, but also transportation. I think if you look at what happened here in Rochester with the train station, that's completely ADA compliant, but that's because members of the disability community were able to influence Louise Slaughter, who was able to influence the design of that particular facility. So good things can happen when there is political pressure.
Got it. Justin?
To add to that, I would say some of the specific issues that the disability community is fighting for is stuff like the Disability Integration Act, which would allow people with disabilities to live in a community, in an integrated community living setting, as opposed to being forced into institutions simply because they have a disability. Representative Jim Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin introduced the House version of that legislation, and Democratic leader Chuck Schumer introduced the Senate one for the last 2 years. So he and his staff have been working very hard with the disability community, specifically the Center for Disability Rights, and ADAPT, which is a national disability rights organization. Also, subminimum wage, which we talked on this program previous, about how people with disabilities because they have a disability, under the Fair Labor Standards Act, can be paid pennies per hour, which is shameful and should be eliminated, and can be eliminated if the Congress passes the Transitioning to Integrated and Meaningful Employment Act, which has been introduced year after year after year by Representative Greg Harper from Mississippi. Unfortunately, the Senate has not always followed his lead. The only time, to my knowledge, the Senate introduced a companion bill was by Kelly Ayotte in 2015, which unfortunately only got one co-sponsor. So we are hopeful that other companion bills in the Senate can be introduced by other leaders who have taken up the lead on that side of Congress. Other pieces of legislation is related to ensuring that you have affordable, accessible, integrated housing, which there's a lack of locally, state, and national. So those are some of the key issues, making sure that we can live our lives the way we want without losing our liberties or our freedoms. And unfortunately, that's, like I said before, that's not a priority of this Congress or the federal government or the judiciary branch either.
So Justin, I mean, he laid out like active bills, and so, I mean, have we in recent history, have we seen? I mean, you mentioned this past year, no movement, Justin. Tim, have we seen anything in recent history to show that?
I would say that the ABLE Act, for example, which was an amendment to a law that goes back to the 1980s, which allows individuals to set aside savings account for people with disabilities in terms of education, future health care, and some limits on housing. This money is important because it is not taxed, but it also doesn't count towards things like Social Security, disability, or other Medicaid or other means tests that the government has. And the states get to implement that. That was passed in 2014. And New York State has implemented the ABLE Act. And so there is, I think it's like myable.gov that people can go to check out how they would set up one of these accounts. So that was 2014. Probably the most important legislation before that was the ADA Amendments Act of 2008.
Yes.
Now that expanded the definition of what we mean by disabled after the Supreme Court had narrowed the definition of the 1990 ADA Act. So it was an important amendment, but that was nearly 10 years ago now. So we haven't seen a number of things. And as Justin was pointing out, the Disability Integration Act, which Louis Slaughter is a co-sponsor of, is also something that would really guarantee the rights of individuals to live in the communities in which they want to live and prosper and contribute, as opposed to the laws that exist now that really give preference to institutions, right? Tax credits and other things to help people with disabilities to go to nursing homes or places like that. That's really not what the disability community wants.
So, Justin, the Center for Disability Rights, you host candidate forums on disability rights during election years. This has been a consistent thing that you've done. I had an opportunity to moderate one of those a couple years ago. And you also, in the process, you're inviting candidates from major races to participate in a candidate survey as well. So it's kind of like this twofold thing. And the results are really intended to help voters make informed decisions before they go to the polls. And I want to know, what type of response generally do you get, A, from the candidates, A, to participate in the surveys, and B, to show up and be a part of the forum? Are they responsive?
Unfortunately, from what I've seen, from my colleagues, from what they've informed me, those that have been coordinating these events for the past several years, they put out we create a survey, which is a collaborative process between several staff members, myself included, with the past 2 years at least. And we send them out to all the candidates that we think are going to be running county and citywide, because that's where a majority of the people that we serve live.
Right.
And we put out these surveys and we get them back, and the number that we get back, as opposed to the ones we sent out, are not good numbers. We get a handful back, and then we get to our candidate forums, which we hold every year, which is usually a 2-hour event. We get maybe a handful of candidates who are actually running. So to come speak, to answer questions that the disability community wants to know about issues that are pertinent to them, and us of what we need to know and how we want to make an informed choice of who we want to vote for.
In terms of people, sorry to interrupt, in terms of those candidates who do come, we're talking both political parties are represented?
Both political parties. We invite them, but unfortunately at times the Republicans, we do have Republican candidates show, like Joe Robach, he's shown, but unfortunately, when we invite other Republican candidates, for the last 2 years at least, not many have shown. Usually, it's Democrats and third-party candidates.
So, Tim, under what circumstances would a politician not come before, and how detrimental can that be to not come to meet with your constituents and to hear about the concerns and to educate themselves?
I think there's a couple of things going here. Number one, and I have not attended the forums, but Center for Disability Rights has been very good about putting transcripts up of these particular these forums, and it's fascinating the number of politicians who express empathy or sympathy for members of the disability community, but they seem so unaware. Right, kudos to Todd Baxter for showing up this year, but his unawareness of the need for transportation vans to get people to and from Monroe County Jail, right, that would have wheelchair accessibility and some other options. Again, the problems among people who have communication disabilities that make it difficult for the police to interact. I mean, these are critical issues that we're supposed to have a council on people with disabilities from Monroe County and the mayors, which seems to be largely defunct, in informing elected officials and others about these issues. But I think part of the problem is this. There is a voting gap for people with disabilities. Registration among the disabled community and the abled community are equal, but voting there's a gap with people with disabilities. And I think some of that comes down to the way that our voting machines are set up, some of the facilities that are not ADA compliant because they've gotten waivers that affect, in Monroe County, we don't really have early voting. You can have an absentee ballot, and if you are certified to be disabled permanently, you can have an absentee ballot sent to your place of residence. But again, these are not the kind of things I think that the disabled community would like to see. They would like to have people go to the voting place, have greater accessibility, have equipment that is much more designed for a variety of people with disabilities. And I think that that's one of the reasons why that politicians have been able to neglect these issues, because we're not seeing the same kind of voting drive among people with disabilities. But at the same time, if they don't address the voting systems, then you're not going to see the turnout that you would expect from people who have a position of influence in this community.
I want to ask this before I lose you two, because we run out of time. But talk to me about this past fall. I need to know. We asked the question: why aren't more women running for politics, running for political office? Yes, we saw the numbers increase this past year in 2017, but those spikes happen and then they drop, according to researchers. So I have to ask the question: why do you think it is that we do not have more disability representation when it comes to elected offices within government? Justin.
Because the Board of Elections does not help people with disabilities try and run. A colleague of mine and a good friend of mine tried to run for city council, and there was little to no direction of where to go, get your what they call walking lists, where that you actually have a specific party roles of who you're supposed to target when you want to get petitions to get on the ballots. And because this person was a wheelchair user, the Board of Elections assumed that they could not carry this box of names, which is very ableist, and we do not feel is fair to the disability community, and that's one of the many reasons why people with disabilities are not encouraged to run, because something of stuff like that. Also, to echo what Tim was saying in regard to voting itself, it's not user-friendly for people with disabilities. Particularly if you want a write-in candidate. I've been told there's a market balloting system, and to use a write-in candidate, you have to scroll all the way down and then hit enter on your pad if you're using the specific pad, and then do not letter by letter until you get to spell out the candidate's name. And if the person's name is long, you can't do that.
And I'm sorry, I have to wrap. I hate to do this, but I hope that you two will come back, as obviously an important conversation that we could spend much more time on. A very special thank you to my guests, Tim Nealon and Justin Young, for joining me today.